Our suffering as humans comes from holding on to the past, through our attachment to memories. These memories shape how we see the future, often in ways that aren't helpful. We create images of the past and the future that our minds use to feel like we're in control. But as we grow and experience life, we start to see that no matter how hard we try to control things, life has its own plans. This realization can be humbling because it shows us that our imagined control over the future is just that, imagined. In today's society, we often push ourselves to take charge of life, believing that we must impose our beliefs and plans not just on our own lives, but sometimes on others too. This mindset can be the beginning of tyranny. In contrast, the ancient wisdom of Lao-tzu teaches us about Wu-Wei, which means non-doing or effortless action. Lao-tzu emphasizes that when we stop trying to force or control everything, we begin to gain a different kind of control, one that we might not have realized existed. Taoism, as taught by Lao-tzu, is about following the way, or the Tao. The Tao is something we experience by paying close attention to both our inner selves and the world around us. We can truly follow the Tao when we let go of our need to control and allow ourselves to move into a state of spontaneity and trust. This state, called Wu-Wei, is not about doing nothing, but rather about acting in a way that feels natural and effortless. This effortless way of being, this not forcing, allows us to experience life more fully and naturally. When we follow the Tao, we begin to see that we are part of nature, not separate from it. We find a deep awareness that our lives are interconnected with everything around us. The core teaching of Wu-Wei can only be understood when we are sincere in letting go of control and trusting in something greater than ourselves. The Tao is this greater force, a vast understanding that goes beyond our personal lives. Wu-Wei is the essence of the Tao, a spiritual attitude that has been lived and expressed by many wise individuals throughout history, including gurus, masters, saints, sages, shamans, and yogis. When we begin to notice the flow of the Tao within our lives, much like a sage does, we start to become open to where our life experiences are guiding us. Instead of holding tightly to past experiences, we find ourselves renewed and fully present in the moment. The future, which we often worry about, becomes nothing more than an illusion. Our consciousness starts to blend with the nurturing and receptive energy of the Tao, often described as the feminine womb of existence. In this state, when we stop trying to control everything around us, we come to a powerful realization. We are not separate from life. We are life itself. Our constant and often fruitless attempts to control life stem from how we are raised. Society and culture teach us that we are separate from the world, that we don't truly belong here. This belief makes us feel like outsiders in a world that is, in reality, our home. It's like being part of a cosmic joke that has no punchline. We're conditioned to believe that the universe is hostile, that we should fear one another and never trust anyone. This way of thinking is dragging humanity down, pushing us toward self-destruction. If we continue to polarize ourselves at the current rate, it's hard to imagine there will be any trace of higher conscious life left on this planet in 1,000 years. Our lack of trust is not only damaging human civilization, but it's also causing immense harm to the animal, plant, and mineral kingdoms. This deep-rooted mistrust has reached a point where, on an individual level, we don't even trust our own thoughts and feelings. We act in ways that are not true to ourselves. confusing our real identity with the social roles we play. By living as mere shadows of our true selves, we end up causing harm to others, condemning those who disagree with us, and even hurting the ones we love, often without realizing it. All of this chaos and harm comes from our obsession with force and control. Social and cultural norms reinforce this mentality, teaching us that to act any other way is foolish. Governments, organized religions, and societal structures embody this lack of trust that we feel within ourselves. When individuals lose their natural ability to trust, something external, like a tyrannical government or institution, steps in to take its place, pretending to be a trustworthy authority figure. The root of the problem is that many people don't trust themselves, which is why they blindly trust their government or other external authorities. When we hand over our power to the government, we start to see it as a parent figure rather than what it truly is, a servant to the people. Our unwillingness to take responsibility for our own lives is a sign that we don't trust ourselves. We invest too much energy into these external forces, turning them into phantoms that control our lives. However, individuals who truly trust themselves and others pose a threat to the established order of culture, society, organized religion, and government. This threat could only become a reality if people rediscover the truth of the Tao and develop a deep trust in life. The Taoist principle of Wu-Wei is all about this trust. The trust that comes with Wu-Wei challenges the very foundation of any government, social system, religion, or culture. When we align ourselves with this innate trust, we stop forcing things and instead allow life to unfold naturally. This alignment brings us back into harmony with the entire cosmos. When we move with the flow rather than against it, we are no longer stuck in the past, nor do we anxiously chase the future. We can only unite with the source of the Tao when we have fully embraced the realm of Wu-Wei, where we do not force, react, or try to control. Lao-tzu's wisdom is simply the understanding of how to follow the effortless grace of Wu-Wei within our own minds. Everything that has developed around Lao-tzu's core wisdom is either a way to help us understand Wu-Wei or a distraction that delays our enlightenment. These distractions often come in the form of spiritual exercises and practices that, while well-intentioned, can become crutches. According to the ancient masters Lao-tzu and Chuang-tzu, true enlightenment isn't found in these practices, but in living the principle of Wu-Wei. Wu-Wei, which means non-doing or effortless action, is the key to realizing our innate freedom. It's not about adding more to our lives, but about letting go and aligning with the natural flow of the universe. Lao-tzu's Taoism emphasizes that if we don't allow people to grow naturally, as they were meant to, they will lose their true nature. When people are forced away from their natural path, they get caught up in animalistic drives, desires, attachments, and ultimately, suffering. This idea is sharply contrasted with the teachings of Confucius in an imaginary dialogue created by Chuang-tzu. In this dialogue, Lao-tzu and Confucius discuss the concepts of charity and duty to one's neighbor. Lao-tzu asks Confucius, "Tell me, what do charity and duty to one's neighbor consist of?" Confucius responds, "They consist of rejoicing in all things, of universal love without selfishness. These are the characteristics of charity and duty to one's neighbor." But Lao-tzu is not convinced. He replies, "What nonsense! Doesn't universal love contradict itself? Isn't your idea of eliminating self, actually a way of emphasizing the self. If you want the empire to stay connected to its source of nourishment, look to the universe. Its regularity never ceases. The sun and moon shine without stopping. The stars remain in their patterns. Birds and beasts gather without change. Trees and shrubs grow upward without exception. Be like these. Follow the Tao, and you will be perfect. Why then do you struggle with charity and duty to one's neighbor, as if you were beating a drum in search of a runaway? Alas, you've caused much confusion in the mind of man. In this dialogue, Lao-tzu makes it clear that when we interfere with the natural process of any living thing, we cause it to become isolated from the rest of the whole. This isolation leads to a disconnection, creating a lack of trust in the mind. Confucius's ideas of charity and duty to others are ancient teachings that have been debated and explored by artists, philosophers, and spiritual leaders from the earliest days of civilization to the present. On the surface, many of us might agree with Confucius's belief that we have a duty to others. But Lao-tzu's way of the Tao offers a different perspective. Lao-tzu suggests that when we interfere in others' lives, no matter the reason or the scale, we are assuming that life isn't happening naturally and spontaneously. Instead, we start to believe that life should follow a predictable, controlled process. Lao-tzu isn't saying we should abolish duty or charity altogether. What he's pointing out is that everything in the universe is interconnected and works in harmony according to the natural rhythm of the cosmos. If everything else functions naturally and without interference, why should humanity be any different? The Tao or the Wu-Wei teaches us that our experience of life is best when we allow all aspects of the universe to unfold naturally without trying to control them. By letting go of our need to interfere and allowing life to happen as it will, we align ourselves with the greater harmony of the universe. This understanding of the Tao is a deep, unshakable trust in life itself, a trust that can bring humanity together if we all live by it. Our superficial differences would dissolve if each person embraced this trust. However, society and culture have been built on ideologies like Confucianism, communism, and democracy. These systems teach us, in one way or another, to impose our will on each other, mistakenly believing that this is how we achieve freedom. But trusting in the way of the Tao is the complete opposite of Confucianism, or any modern-day ideology or belief system. Lao-tzu's wisdom reveals humanity's selfish habit of trying to impose the will of one individual, nation, religion, race, or gender over another. We are constantly interfering with each other's natural sovereignty, believing that our way is the right way. Many people do this every day, often without even realizing it, and then claim to understand what freedom and love are. But how can we truly listen to and help each other if we're only doing so through the lens of our own cultural, social, or religious perspectives? If we approach others with a set of beliefs to impose on them, we're not allowing them to grow as nature intended. This is the personal agenda that Lao-tzu warns against. When we interfere with any living organism on this planet, we disrupt its natural growth by trying to control it. When an organism is interfered with, it struggles to grow into what it was meant to be. Its natural drive to grow is met with resistance from another organism that assumes it is superior and independent of all other life. In many ways, humans fit perfectly into this category. We constantly try to impose our personal agendas on the world, agendas that could only have developed in a world where trust is lacking. Because we live in fear rather than trust, We have created a world that is so sterile and controlled that it resembles a morgue more than a vibrant living garden. The Confucian idea of dictating a social way of life to the individual shapes a person's identity based on external concepts and objects rather than their inner world of emotions, feelings, and thoughts. But we shouldn't just criticize the Confucian perspective, because any ideology or theology, no matter how well-meaning, is essentially a method for shaping individuals according to its beliefs. Lao-tzu highlights this in the Tao Te Ching, pointing out that humanity is caught in a never-ending cycle where we try to change each other or society based on our belief systems. Because we haven't made our inner world conscious, we keep trying to change the outer world of forms, as if the inner world were just a reflection of the outer. Many theologies and ideologies operate from this perspective. But this is an absurd way of thinking, because the world has no meaning until we, as observers, give it meaning based on our beliefs. This should be a fundamental part of how we think and perceive the world. Instead, we are taught that the world is purely material by the cultural, social, religious, and educational systems that have been passed down to us, often by those who were themselves indoctrinated. To build a sane society, we first need to recognize that our perception was pure before it was colored by external influences. These external influences are interpreted differently by each person, which only adds to the confusion. Patanjali, the great sage of India and father of yoga, captured this idea in 3 of his sutras about freedom. People perceive the same object differently, as each person's perception follows a separate path from another's. But the object is not dependent on either of those perceptions. If it were, what would happen to it when nobody was looking? An object is known only by a consciousness it has colored. Otherwise, it is not known. We have built a world that operates in reverse to the natural order of growth and harmonious living. The general view of the world identifies with what colors consciousness, rather than with the unbound and limitless pure awareness at the core of our being. Lao-tzu's essential teaching of Wu-Wei offers a remedy for this problem. But it's important to understand that Wu-Wei is not an ideology, theology, or something you need to believe in. It is a way of being, a natural alignment with the flow of life that allows us to live in harmony with the universe. Wu-Wei, the principle of effortless action, isn't something you can simply read about or be told to believe in. It's a way of living that can only be truly understood through your own experience. Once you've experienced it, your trust in Wu-Wei naturally deepens. This trust is about allowing life to flow without trying to control or force things to happen. The natural order of growth and harmony in the world depends on this kind of non-interference. When we live in alignment with Wu-Wei, we are in tune with the Tao, the natural flow of the universe. Many people struggle with the idea of letting life take its course because it seems counterintuitive. We're often taught that we must work hard to control every aspect of our lives to achieve our goals. But if we look closely, we can see that every attempt to rigidly control our lives is eventually overturned by the spontaneous, unpredictable nature of life itself. No matter how hard we try, no human being is exempt from this universal spontaneity. Despite this, many people continue to believe they can control life down to the smallest detail. They don't realize that the very things that have shaped who they are were beyond their control from the start. The urge to control everything is really a sign that we feel powerless, as if we've lost something important. But true power isn't about controlling others or accumulating wealth. It lies in the mind of someone who has freed themselves from these desires. When we stop trying to control life, we find a new kind of freedom. We no longer cling to anything or let ourselves be conditioned by life's ups and downs. We become free from attachments, and in that freedom, we discover a deeper peace. Some of the most liberated people in history, like the Indian sage Sri Ramana Maharshi, lived this way. They didn't let the world dictate who they should be, and as a result, they found a kind of inner freedom that few ever experience. This kind of liberated individual is often seen as a threat to social, religious, and cultural systems. These systems rely on keeping people bound by superficial rules and expectations. Someone who truly knows and follows the Tao is dangerous to these systems because they are no longer controlled by external influences. From the perspective of society, religion, or culture, these individuals are rebels who could disrupt the status quo. Throughout history, we've seen how people who embody this kind of freedom are often persecuted. Take the example of Jesus of Nazareth. Whether you believe his story is literal or metaphorical, his teachings and way of being posed such a threat to the established order that he was crucified. True and eternal freedom, the kind that comes from within, is something that tyrants and oppressive systems despise. When we find this inner freedom, we stop conforming to the demands of those who seek to control us. Artists, mystics, philosophers, scientists, and spiritual seekers often express this state of inner freedom through their creativity and humility. Their work and lives often reveal the flaws in systems that try to dictate how people should think and live. Lao-tzu's Taoist way has always been a challenge to the established order. In China, true Taoism was seen as such a threat that it was suppressed during the early years of the People's Republic, and people were even persecuted during the Cultural Revolution. Yet, despite these challenges, Taoism continued to be practiced in places like Taiwan, showing that the spirit of Wu-Wei and the Tao cannot be easily extinguished. Taoism has often been misunderstood and even looked down upon because its core teaching, Wu-Wei, is about surrendering to the natural flow of the universe rather than conforming to the rules and ethics of society. Wu-Wei, which means non-action or effortless action, encourages us to trust the universe and let go of the need to control everything. For true Taoists, this means embracing the absolute Tao, the ultimate way of the universe, which is a concept that can be difficult for established systems of thought to grasp. The Tao of Lao-tzu is vast, mysterious, and doesn't fit neatly into the boxes that society likes to create. Because of this, an authentic Taoist is often seen as something strange or even dangerous, sometimes labeled as a soothsayer or a witch. Because our world is uncomfortable with things it can't easily define or categorize. People often try to define the Tao in simple terms to feel a sense of understanding. But this is a misunderstanding itself. The truth that Lao-tzu and other Taoists experience is something that goes beyond intellectual understanding. It's an experiential truth that frustrates those who rely solely on logic and established beliefs. This deeper truth poses a challenge to any ideology, theology, or organized religion because it doesn't fit within the social structures that keep people following the rules set by others. This conflict is a major reason why Lao-tzu's Taoist teachings often clash with Confucius's ideology. Lao-tzu believed that any form of social or cultural hierarchy disrupts our natural trust in the universe. Confucius, on the other hand, believed that society would benefit if those in power were morally noble and governed with wisdom. But Lao-tzu saw this as a way of controlling people rather than freeing them. Confucius's system was designed to maintain order and prevent people from questioning their place in society. It wasn't about individual freedom. It was about managing society efficiently. Democracy, in some ways, operates similarly. It aims to create a comfortable and convenient society based on liberal ideas, but it often discourages people from asking the deeper questions about life and the power structures that govern them. The hierarchies found in governments, banks, corporations, and royal families often end up becoming more about maintaining power than serving the people. According to Lao-tzu, any system that seeks to control life goes against the natural way of things. When control becomes the goal, it turns into a selfish urge to dominate others. As John Dalberg Acton, an English historian and politician, famously said in 1887, "Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men." The desire for power has led to a world where we try to control life within rigid boundaries, stripping it of its spontaneity. True evolution, however, comes from pushing beyond these limitations and challenging the traditional structures we've created. In the modern world, the dogmas of Confucianism, Taoism, and other religious traditions are being put to the test. These systems are starting to feel outdated, and people are becoming more attuned to a more authentic form of spirituality. A spirituality that recognizes our deep connection to each other, the world, and the universe. While traditions themselves aren't necessarily bad and can hold great beauty, they become harmful when they create rigid dogmas that imprison the mind. Take modern-day Christianity as an example. Over time, the original teachings have often been overshadowed by strict doctrines that limit personal growth and spiritual freedom. Lao-tzu's way was never to be bound by any tradition that restricted our inner freedom. He believed that if we remain centered within ourselves, we can move in harmony with the evolutionary energies of the universe, allowing life to unfold naturally without resistance. These energies often manifest as synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that guide us along our path. While traditions may fade or change over time, their influence can linger in the collective consciousness, sometimes for generations. Asia provides a strong example of how old ideologies, like Confucianism, continue to shape societies, even when people might not openly acknowledge their influence. Confucianism, with its deeply ingrained beliefs and practices, acts as a hidden force that keeps many from embracing change. The rigid traditions born from these beliefs create tension and frustration in everyday life, because they no longer resonate with the evolved consciousness of today's people. In the same way, many of us are moving beyond the empty materialism of the West, which often tries to force liberal ideals on everyone, whether they fit or not. Today, both individually and collectively, consciousness is moving to a new rhythm, one that's more aligned with the natural order of the universe. This order is not random. It follows a beautiful, organic pattern that is the blueprint for how nature expresses itself. In Chinese, this pattern is called Lai. Li is often described as the natural markings in jade, the grain in wood, or the fibers in muscle. It represents a unique pattern that originates from within each organism, guiding its growth and development as it harmonizes with the Tao, the natural way of the universe. Interestingly, the concept of Li is often linked to Neo-Confucianism rather than Taoism. But this version of Li shouldn't be confused with the Confucian virtue of Li, which is about following the correct rituals and ceremonies. The Confucian idea of Li has little to do with the harmony of nature or the effortless action of Wu-Wei. Instead, it focuses on social etiquette and moral behavior, which, while important, don't connect to the deeper, more natural rhythms of the universe that Taoism teaches. Nature, in its purest form, always follows the Taoist Li. The mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms naturally follow this pattern because they don't have the intelligence to challenge it. Humans, however, as the most intelligent beings on the planet, often try to go against these natural laws. We seem to have a split sense of identity, as if we believe we're somehow separate from the rest of life on Earth. Yet ironically, we depend on nature for everything, from the food we eat to the air we breathe. Without nature, we couldn't have evolved from simpler life forms to the complex beings we are today. This feeling of being separate from other life forms comes from our tendency to see the world in a linear way. We build our societies around this linear thinking, creating systems like culture, government, politics, and religion that are all about control and order. These systems, which we take for granted, actually go against the natural flow of the Tao. We hold on to these systems out of fear that life would be chaotic without them. But they're based on the false belief that we can control nature's patterns, like Lai. The destruction of the environment for material gain is a direct result of this mindset. We focus more on the rules and structures we've created than on the natural world that sustains us. Because nature operates in a non-linear way, it's difficult for us, with our linear thinking, to truly understand it. This misunderstanding leads us to try to dominate nature, not realizing that in doing so, we're also harming ourselves. Lao-tzu and Chuang-tzu, two great Taoist sages, warned that this lack of understanding will ultimately lead to our downfall. When we fail to understand nature, we fail to understand our own true nature. The Tao, as Chuang-tzu saw it, is present in all things, including human life. We are not separate from nature. We are a part of it. Our desire to control nature stems from ignoring our own natural essence, which happens when we allow external influences to turn us into something like machines, disconnected from the natural world. As a result, our psychology becomes more like the repetitive actions of a machine rather than the spontaneous flow of nature. The average person is so focused on maintaining these artificial systems that they have little energy left to explore their own inner world. But this outward focus, if left unchecked, could lead us to self-destruction, because all true growth comes from within the organism. Everything in nature, including humans, follows this universal pattern. Even though we can disrupt nature's harmony, we can never completely destroy it, because the Tao is always present, flowing through the patterns of Lai. Organisms that try to go against this order, including humans, do not fare well in the long run. We often forget that the pattern of Eli exists within us too. The same intelligence that shapes the ecosystems around us is also found in our nervous systems, senses, and even our psychological processes. This is why people who practice spiritual cultivation often have a harmonious mind and body. They respect their own natural rhythms and avoid overstimulating themselves with excessive consumption. By aligning themselves with the Tao, they achieve a balance that many others, caught up in the rush of modern life, struggle to find. Understanding and respecting this natural order is key to living a life in harmony with both the world around us and our true selves. The Taoist philosophy of Li teaches us that anyone can reach a state of true harmony with the world, but to do so, we must act in alignment with nature. If we look closely at how nature operates, we see that it is quite different from the way most people live their lives today. So, what does it mean for a human being to act as nature intended? Nature's way is harmonious because each part of it follows its own unique path, or lie. This lie is how each element of nature finds its place and balances with everything else, creating a system of mutual resonance and interdependence. In Chinese, this concept is known as yin, and it's a central idea in Taoist philosophy. Yin shows us how different parts of nature respond to and harmonize with each other effortlessly. Understanding this is crucial for achieving what Taoists call the effortless mind, a state of being where everything flows naturally. When we observe nature, we don't see the hectic activity and chaos that we often find in a busy city. Instead, we notice a world that is simple and at peace, because everything in nature is aligned with the Tao, the underlying force that flows through all things. This stillness in nature reflects the essence of Tao. The Taoist sage Lao-tzu once said that if you stand at the still point of the Tao, which he imagined as the center of a circle, you can see the infinite possibilities in the world around you. This means that when your mind is completely empty and still, you can perceive reality as it truly is, without the distortions caused by your own thoughts and worries. The Tao frees the mind from its usual linear way of thinking and helps it move in harmony with the natural order of things. To live according to nature requires us to be open and receptive to the forces of the universe, and this can only happen when the mind is completely still. In Sanskrit, the process of calming the mind is called nirodha, a term used in Patanjali's classical yoga, which means restriction or the stopping of the mind's constant activity, known as vritti. The goal of many meditation practices and Eastern wisdom traditions is to quiet the mind. But here's the paradox. You can't reach this state if you think of it as something to achieve or chase after. That's because the stillness of mind isn't something you have to go out and find. It's already your natural state, right here and now. The more you try to attain it, the further away it seems. Instead, you need to recognize that this calm, still mind is your true nature, waiting to be uncovered when you let go of all the mental noise. By understanding and embracing this stillness, you can begin to live in a way that is in harmony with nature, responding to the world around you with the same effortless ease that you see in the natural world. This is the essence of acting according to Lai and living in alignment with the Tao. This realization that enlightenment is already within us is often hidden by the illusions and distractions we've picked up from the world around us. The wisdom of a sage is to understand that enlightenment isn't something we need to chase after or attain. It's already our true nature. A sage might ask us, how could you ever achieve something that is already a part of who you are? Now, it might seem that this truth is easy for sages to grasp, but it's important to remember that they too went on a journey of self-discovery. They had to go through the same process of peeling back the layers of their conditioned personality, which had been shaped by external influences, before they could clearly see that consciousness, by its very nature, is as transparent and reflective as still water. Think about water for a moment. When it's disturbed by waves or ripples, it loses its clarity and its ability to reflect what's around it. But when the water is completely still, it returns to its pure state, clear and reflective, showing its true essence. The mind works in a similar way. Its natural state is one of stillness which goes beyond effort. But just like water, the mind can become clouded and restless due to the conditioning and habits we pick up over time, obscuring its true nature. When we start to empty our minds of these ingrained habits and tendencies, we get closer to the essence of the Tao. The Tao of the Absolute is found within our natural stillness. It is from this stillness that true spontaneity arises effortlessly. And it is within this stillness that the virtue of Wu-Wei, the art of action without force, can be fully lived. When we connect with the still point of the Tao, we begin to nourish all of existence through the effortless way of Wu-Wei. Some of the most significant progress for humanity will occur when we confront the deep conflict that ties us to a world dominated by mechanical systems. Radical changes are necessary to shift our awareness back to the natural flow of the cosmos. From the perspective of a sage, the real question isn't about how we can get rid of these unnatural systems we've created, but rather, how far are we willing to go in our understanding and application of the Tao? Taoist teachings emphasize that if we truly understand the natural, spontaneous unfolding of the universe, then we won't resist this process. By living effortlessly, in harmony with Wu-Wei, the natural order of the cosmos will take its course. We can't solve the problem of an overbearing system of government by simply creating more rules or trying to govern even more tightly. This is one of the major differences between Confucianism and Taoism. Confucianism advocates for a strict system where one should govern their life both internally and externally, according to its philosophy. But Lao-tzu would have seen this approach as absurd. The very principles of governance, control, force, and the pursuit of power actually disconnect us from the natural harmony of the universe. As a result, we often feel like we don't belong, as if we're out of sync with the world. To govern is to control, and control is built on past experiences and future plans. But in doing so, we shut out the natural beauty and flow of life, which is why creating a different system of government isn't the solution we need. Instead, we must look to the Tao and the effortless way of Wu-Wei to find true harmony. If we can truly embrace the concept of Wu-Wei, we allow the Tao to naturally restore balance by not taking action against the problems we face. Protests and revolutions don't bring about real change, because they are still rooted in human desires to control and manipulate life. To govern is to control, and control ultimately leads to the destruction of life. To reverse this, we need to return to nature and follow the principles of Wu-Wei. Humans have the ability to understand Wu-Wei, but unlike other living things, many of us lack this understanding from experience. This raises the question of whether we are truly the most intelligent species on Earth. To escape from these unnatural systems, we must reconnect with nature. Our true nature, guided by the virtue of Ti, follows a natural pattern. Nature doesn't rely on force, control, or power. Its order and patterns are spontaneous and free from external influence. The Taoist concept of nature is captured by the term Zhujian, which means something that arises naturally on its own. When an organism is in harmony with life, it grows and develops spontaneously. Zhujian only comes into being without any external force. Tzujan represents the spiritual essence found in many religions, especially in ancient Chinese and Indian wisdom. When we step back from our conditioned ways of seeing the world, we return to our natural state and grow in harmony with everything around us. What would happen if we stopped trying to control everything? When we leave animals, plants, and minerals alone, they thrive without interference. So, what if we did the same with people? From a Taoist perspective, if we allowed people to follow their own passions and interests, harmony would naturally arise in communities, no matter their size. Without external interference, people would follow their true nature, and the need to obey unnatural societal rules would disappear. By following our own nature, we would naturally align with others and the environment. When we let life take its natural course, the Tao brings everything into order without us trying to impose order. Some might mistakenly see this as anarchy, but there's a key difference. Anarchists act based on what they oppose, while those who understand Tzujan simply follow their own nature, unconcerned with institutional power, allowing life to unfold as it will. An anarchist is still influenced by external factors, unable to completely detach from the outside world. If society were to descend into anarchy, the very motivation behind it would undermine its purpose. Nature simply exists as it is, without any motives or objectives. It is not something we can force or initiate like a project. Tao, the natural way of things, cannot be manipulated or induced. It unfolds spontaneously on its own. This is what the Chinese term Tzujan represents. Anarchy, in its attempt to reject societal norms and bring about a new order, tries to force the Tao into existence through a deliberate intellectual decision to abandon the current system. While anarchy might seem like a step in the right direction, it's not the right approach for truly liberating the world, because it still carries an agenda, a desire to control the outcome. The Russian evolutionary theorist Peter Kropotkin understood the subtle difference between anarchy and Tzujan. He proposed that if people were left alone to follow their natural instincts, a genuine social order and true form of governance would emerge from within the current system. His theory closely mirrors the Taoist concept of Tzujan, reflecting a deep understanding similar to that of a sage. However, Kropotkin's ideas were labeled as anarchism, making it easy for people to dismiss them as just another political ideology without fully grasping their depth. Although Kropotkin's theory may seem radical, it is rooted in a profound trust in human nature, which aligns with the wisdom of Lao-tzu. According to this perspective, true governance is found in the collective power that arises when people sincerely trust one another to live their lives without interference. This is the social virtue or te of the community. True governance can only be achieved when we relinquish the need to control others. By giving up our power to govern, we gain a different kind of power, one that goes beyond the need for control. Just as we give up our personal virtue to attain a deeper, more authentic virtue, we must give up our power to govern in order to create a government that transcends traditional governance. Life naturally finds its balance when we allow the world to be what it is. This is the paradox of life, which often confounds our logical, linear thinking. The classical Taoist text, Chuang Tzu, expresses this idea beautifully. I have heard of letting the world be, of leaving it alone. I have never heard of governing the world. You let it be for fear of corrupting the inborn nature of the world. You leave it alone for fear of distracting the virtue of the world. If the nature of the world is not corrupted, if the virtue of the world is not distracted, why should there be any governing of the world? Long ago, when the sage Yao governed the world, he made the world bright and gleeful. Men delighted in their nature, and there was no calmness anywhere. When the tyrant Xie governed the world, he made the world weary and vexed. Men found bitterness in their nature, and there was no contentment anywhere. To lack calmness, to lack contentment, is to go against virtue. And there has never been anyone in the world who could go against virtue and survive for long. The important question we must ask is, how can we learn to sincerely trust others and allow them to live as they choose? If we can step back and let people be, the world will naturally begin to heal and grow in harmony with the Tao. None of this is possible unless we have truly realized and understood the concept of Zhujian within ourselves. Even though the wisdom of Wu-Wei, effortless action, and Zhujian, natural spontaneity, has been around since the time of Lao-tzu, only a small number of people have been genuinely committed to bringing peace into their hearts and the hearts of others. Most people, however, are like a national leader who claims to bring peace by waging war. This contradiction exists because their idea of peace is shaped by their own desires and conditioned thinking, which they mistakenly equate with pleasure and happiness. Many refuse to acknowledge this truth because they are still caught up in the layers of conditioning that have shaped their identities. In this conditioned state, we are like a tree that is constantly pruned to grow straight and rigid. But our true nature can never be rigid or confined, because we are always connected to the Tao, which transcends all names and forms. Even the temporary feelings of rigidity and control arise from the Tao. Much like a wave momentarily rising in the vast ocean, we can only allow others the freedom to live their own lives if we are sincere in our introspection and willing to shed the conditioning that clouds our unity with our fellow humans. When we are genuinely humble and free from hidden agendas, we nourish and quietly transform the world, not by trying to change it, but by simply being. A sage has no agenda, and this absence of personal motives breathes spiritual life into the world. We all have experienced different forms of conditioning, and we all share similar physical and emotional experiences, which allows us to empathize with others who suffer from the same illusions as we do. At the same time, if we are all fundamentally the same, we also have within us the same qualities that a sage embodies. The I Ching, an ancient Chinese text, illustrates through its 64 hexagrams how a small change in one part of a system can transform the entire system when that small part allows itself to change, bringing it back into harmony with the Tao. This process should be understood on a psychological level. When a small part of us softens and lets go of its rigid conditioning, it begins to align with the natural flow of the universe. This softening is a metaphor for a person allowing the ever-changing nature of life to dissolve their rigidity and develop humility. As this inner transformation occurs, Zhujian, natural spontaneity, nature and Tina, virtue, bring the light of heaven, or Tian in Chinese, into the world through the unique pattern, or lie, of an individual's life. The I Ching integrates Taoist principles to show that just as a single drop of water can create ripples in an ocean, so too can a single act of pure intention and transparency have a profound effect on the world. Zhujian is a central concept in the I Ching. For example, when a small part of a system begins to grow naturally on its own, it can influence the entire system over time, encouraging the whole to follow its lead. The entire philosophy of Taoism is based on this idea of natural growth, which brings individuals into harmony with the Tao, and as a result, positively influences the world around them. Through observing nature, sages like Lao-tzu discover that every organic system evolves from another system whose current state no longer serves its purpose. This is the natural cycle of growth, decay, and rebirth. The natural world doesn't just throw away what is old. Instead, it slowly transforms the old into something new. Life builds on what has come before, because everything in existence serves its purpose, contributing to the ongoing process of growth and change. Anarchism, however, doesn't follow this natural pattern. Instead of gradually evolving from the existing order, it seeks to oppose the status quo with its own agenda for reshaping the world. This approach stands in contrast to the way of Lao-tzu, which aligns with the true nature of the world. The concept of Tzu reflects the way things naturally are, and as human beings, we are an intrinsic part of this process. When we withdraw from external pressures and stop trying to control everything, we begin to grow naturally, just as the rest of nature does. This spontaneous growth has a ripple effect, influencing the world around us. We are, in fact, gradually evolving beyond our current civilization, even though many people aren't aware of this change. There's a paradox in this situation. If we keep fighting against our current systems, we prevent natural change from happening. Real growth occurs when we stop resisting and start trusting the process. To move from the old to the new, life must accept its current conditions and begin to resonate at a higher level, building on what came before. Our social and cultural systems have played their role. They've taught us important lessons. However, they are no longer necessary because we've learned what we needed to learn from them. The problem arises when we view the past as a series of mistakes. This attitude reflects a deep-seated feeling of not belonging, a kind of hypnosis that disconnects us from the natural flow of life. True trust means recognizing that everything we've experienced, both individually and collectively, happened exactly as it was supposed to. No matter how much suffering or bloodshed we've witnessed, it all brought us to where we are now. Life is fundamentally right, but we need to move beyond our narrow concepts of good and bad to see this. Instead of viewing reality through an exclusive lens, we must adopt an inclusive perspective that embraces the whole. Tzu can only fully manifest when we trust that everything the universe has produced is fundamentally correct and couldn't have been any other way. The systems of government, politics, banking, religion, and commerce may be unnatural, but they have served their purpose in getting us to this point. Now, however, they are no longer needed. A true form of government, one that aligns with the natural world, will emerge from the sickness of the old systems, helping to heal the world from the illusions that have held us captive. If we can't trust the world and the people in it, we're doomed, because a species at war with itself cannot survive. The change can start with you, the individual, but it depends on how deeply you can trust. People often claim to trust the universe, but then they criticize life according to their conditioned views. If we are to truly embrace Wu-Wei, effortless action, we need to be bold enough to let life unfold on its own terms. This allows us to become seeds of growth that change the world, not through force or intention, but through our natural being. The Tao can only work through us when we are free from the barriers that prevent us from uniting with the universe. The unity we seek isn't something that can be fully understood through the intellect. It's something we must feel. True unity and a sense of connectedness exist only in a liberated mind. This inner freedom is the most authentic contribution anyone can make to the possibility of a unified humanity. At its core, both consciousness and the universe are about connection. Everything is linked, and ultimately, everything is one. The universe, in all its vastness and wonder, creates consciousness, and in turn, consciousness brings forth the universe. These two are inseparable, and paradoxically, they are one and the same. The big picture of the universe and the small details of consciousness are intertwined, forming a unified whole. A sage knows this deep within, because when the mind is free from all the distractions and illusions of life, it mirrors the endless expanse of the universe. This shows that the foundation of consciousness is as boundless as space itself. However, it's important not to misunderstand this concept. The essence of consciousness is not just an empty blank state, as some spiritual seekers might believe. While consciousness shares the emptiness and vastness of space, it is also like space in that it holds within it the entire universe. Consciousness is always open to new experiences and is constantly changing, just as space is. A mind that is truly free operates in this way, leading naturally to a deep sense of trust. Just as consciousness brings the universe into being, trust brings a sense of oneness into our lives. The truth and reality of the universe and consciousness are one, but it is through trust that this oneness becomes a lived experience within us. When you trust the universe, you begin to feel that you are part of it. The concept of Wu-Wei, effortless action, emerges in the same way. By letting go of control, you tap into the indescribable power and virtue of the Tao. This connection between trust and oneness is at the heart of living in accordance with Wu-Wei. When you are humble enough to allow things to unfold naturally, you start to intuitively feel a deep sense of unity. Lao-Tzu's teachings in the Tao Te Ching reflect this trust for those who can tune into the quiet rhythm of the Tao. Lao-Tzu didn't aim to intellectualize the idea of oneness. Instead, he encouraged people to feel it and know it through their own experience. Organized religions often try to teach the concept of unity, but they tend to do so on an intellectual level. Because most religious doctrines are based on the idea of separation, of humans being separate from God. Their teachings often reflect this isolation. However, the core principle of all religions is about finding the divine within yourself. This idea forms the basis of the Philosophia Perennis, perennial philosophy. The saints and sages of the past explain that by finding God within, you come to understand that oneness is the ultimate reality. The Latin word religare, from which the word religion comes, and the Sanskrit word yuj, the root of the word yoga, both describe the process of uniting with God within. But this doesn't mean we should withdraw from the external world. The unity we find within ourselves is what can bring unity to the world around us. Each person's unique essence, or lie, can harmonize with the entire world, becoming a tool of the indescribable Tao. When we clear away the conditioning that blocks the Tao, the deep peace within us knows only trust, because trust is the recognition of our unity with all things. What we truly seek is the feeling of oneness, a sense of unity within ourselves that remains undisturbed by the ups and downs of life. When we are disturbed, we lose sight of our innate love. In this state, we cannot fully love the world because we judge it through the lens of our own conditioning. But when we let go of these judgments, we rediscover the peace and unity that have always been within us. The only way to truly love the world is by having a trust so deep that it remains unshaken by the distractions and illusions of the mind. This kind of trust is a confirmation that the universe is one and that you truly belong within it. Over time, humanity has constructed doctrine after doctrine in an attempt to explain the universe and our relationship to it. However, these efforts are more about intellectual exploration than about truly experiencing the unity of all things. In our obsession with using our intellect to understand everything, we've lost touch with the simple yet profound beauty of life, something that goes beyond the limits of reason. Religion tries to define God with concepts. Philosophy tries to grasp the universe through theories. And psychology tries to break down the mind into understandable parts. In doing so, we often end up diminishing the world, trying to fit it into definitions that satisfy our limited understanding. The concepts of God, the universe, and the mind are just that. Concepts. They are mental constructs that attempt to describe something that is actually beyond time and space, yet includes both. The issue arises when we cling too tightly to these intellectual explanations, forming rigid ideas about the world that exist only in the realm of names and forms. When we get stuck in this way of thinking, we tend to ignore the inner world, the deeper reality beyond the surface. This is why our planet constantly struggles with conflict, as people fight over differences in nationality, religion, race, and gender. These problems arise because our explanations are always coming from a place of separation. But how can we truly understand concepts like God, the universe, or the mind from a perspective that is already conditioned and limited? We're always trying to measure and define things that cannot be measured. It's impossible to fully explain why trust leads to a feeling of oneness, because some things are simply beyond our ability to understand with the mind alone. This is a key point in the journey of self-realization. We can't always explain why something is true, but we can experience and confirm it within ourselves. If we were genuinely committed to living in alignment with Wu-Wei, we would naturally come to understand the truth of unity by trusting in the natural flow of life. Trying to describe concepts like the Tao, trust, and oneness in Taoist wisdom is like trying to explain the unexplainable. It's similar to the Buddhist concept of the four invisibles. Alan Watts, in The Way of Zen, explains the Buddhist doctrine of the four invisibles, which states that the void, sunya, is to a Buddha as water is to a fish, air is to a human, and the nature of things is to the deluded, beyond understanding. He says, it should be obvious that what we are, most substantially and fundamentally, will never be a distinct object of knowledge. Whatever we can know, life and death, light and darkness, solid and empty, will be the relative aspects of something as inconceivable as the color of space. Awakening is not to know what this reality is. Knowing about trust and oneness with the intellect alone misses the true essence of the experience, because these concepts are dissected into parts rather than understood as part of a greater whole. The union with the Tao is something that can only be truly known when the apparent separations dissolve, revealing the original oneness that was always there. The sense of unity we long to find can never be captured by theories or speculation. As I've pointed out, language itself is bound to the world of duality. So all the efforts of religion, philosophy, and science are in vain if they neglect the role of consciousness and focus solely on intellectual study. Eastern wisdom traditions, particularly Taoism and Zen Buddhism, aim to eliminate such intellectual debates and speculations. They understand that true peace and oneness come from trusting in yourself and in life, not from over-analyzing or trying to explain everything. There's a story about a Chinese Zen master from the 9th century named Tongshan Shouchu. Someone asked him, "What is the Buddha?" And without hesitation he answered, 3 pounds of flax. People have debated the meaning of this answer for years, but all these discussions miss the point. From the Zen point of view, Tongshan was trying to bring the questioner back to the present moment. His seemingly nonsensical answer, 3 pounds of flax, was meant to shut down any attempt at intellectual theorizing or speculation. This is the purpose of a Zen koan, a kind of riddle or puzzle used to challenge a student's mind and help them move beyond logical thinking. A koan is a story, dialogue, or statement that appears as a riddle, and it's used in Zen practice to create doubt and test the student's progress. Some of the earliest koans can be found in the Chuang-Tzu text, which is why some scholars believe Zen Buddhism partly draws on Chuang-Tzu's teachings. In one passage, Chuang-Tzu uses what seems like complete nonsense to confuse our logical minds, forcing us to stop and be in awe of the irrational, impartial nature of life. There is a beginning. There is a not yet beginning to be a beginning. There is a not yet beginning to be a not yet beginning to be a beginning. There is being. There is non-being. There is a not yet beginning to be non-being. There is a not yet beginning to be a not yet beginning to be non-being. Suddenly there is non-being. Trying to make sense of this passage is impossible. And that's exactly the point. Chuang-Tzu is using humor here, poking fun at how people, even in his time, tried to use logic to understand the universe and existence, only to end up with wrong conclusions. Zen masters often use koans to jolt their students back into the present moment, where there's no beginning or end, and where thinking is abandoned in favor of direct experience. One story describes a disciple who was asked by his Zen master to present an exhibition of Zen the following day. The disciple spent the entire night tossing and turning, anxious about how he could satisfy the master's request. The next day, while still worried, he came across a unique Japanese frog. Thinking he'd found the answer, he brought the frog to the master. When the master asked him to exhibit Zen, the disciple showed him the frog. The master simply smirked and said, "No, too intellectual." In other words, the disciple's attempt was too calculated, too thought out. His very act of thinking about it ruined the spontaneity needed to truly embody Zen. To present Zen authentically requires no thinking at all, as Zen is the natural flow of the universe in the eternal now. Zen isn't something to be shown. It's something to be lived effortlessly. When we try to explain trust in a logical or intellectual way, we lose its true essence. Many masters, like Tongshan Shouchu and Chuang-Tzu, had little patience for philosophical debates about the reality of the Tao. They preferred to offer direct experiences of it, letting people discover it for themselves. When we let go of all the intellectual knowledge we've accumulated, we return to that natural sense of unity. It's up to each individual to choose whether or not to live in harmony with Wu-Wei. This choice depends on nothing outside of ourselves. When you step back from trying to control everything outside of yourself, you are choosing to trust. That's because no outside force can break the deep connection you naturally have with the universe. When you trust, you find a peace that helps you fall in sync with the world around you. This not only lets the light of the Tao shine through, but also helps guide you on your journey through life. Trust is like a conversation with the universe. When we trust, the universe speaks back to us through our experiences. This sense of being one with everything brings us back in line with the flow of the universe, like a child finding comfort and nourishment from their mother. When we trust completely, our body, mind, and spirit come together and move in harmony with the heartbeat of the earth. When we clear the way for the Tao to work through us naturally, our body rhythms and our thoughts begin to move in tune with the planet, like an extension of Earth itself. When we fight against what's happening in our lives and try to control everything, we create unnecessary stress within ourselves. This stress comes from our fear of not knowing what's going to happen in the future. We spend so much time planning and trying to shape the future, but these plans are just distractions, pulling us away from the deep sense of unity and peace that trust can bring. Our desire to change the world is actually rooted in the fact that we've disconnected ourselves from living in the here and now. But it's only by being fully present that we can understand what's truly right for the future. Trust and unity are born out of the pure clarity that comes from stillness and peace of mind. When we step out of this peaceful state, we start to mistrust the world, and our minds get tangled up in trying to make sense of things based on what we've been taught or conditioned to believe. The truth is, whenever we try to change the world, we're already off course. The very idea that the world needs changing means we don't trust it. Governments and politics are built on this lack of trust. Their main goal is to reshape the world according to their own agendas. People often believe that government and politics are tools to bring about unity, but in reality, they are based on the idea that the world is broken and divided. Even systems like anarchy and revolution, which oppose the current way of things, are flawed. They still come from the same mindset of trying to change the world according to a new plan. This way of seeing the world, which most of us share, is fundamentally misguided. We think we need to work toward unity, but the very act of trying to work toward unity is born out of our feelings of being separate from one another. How can we create something that's already part of who we are? The unity we're looking for is already inside us, but we can only see it when we start trusting the world as it is. Trying to change the world to find unity is like a knife trying to cut itself. It's impossible. The unity we seek can only come through trust, because it's already there, waiting for us to recognize it. Whenever we try to change the world, we actually do more harm than good. That's because the very idea of trying to change something comes from a false sense of separation. Take organized religion as an example. Many religions make people feel cut off from God, like God is something far away or outside of us. In this separation, we are taught that we need to pray to connect with God. But in a way, the act of praying shows a lack of trust in God. When we pray, even if our prayers seem morally good, we're often trying to influence God to make things go the way we want them to. We might pray that bad things won't happen to us, or that we'll get something we desire, which is essentially trying to bend God's will to match our own wishes. This shows a lack of trust in the natural flow of life. Instead of trusting that things are unfolding as they should, we're trying to reshape the world according to our own beliefs and comforts. If we keep acting this way, we'll never experience the deep connection with life that Thor Heyerdahl felt. Because trust is the foundation of true harmony. True trust and oneness come when we fully let go of ourselves. When we stop trying to control life and let the Tao, the natural flow of the universe, guide us. But this guidance can't come if we're constantly anxious about changing things or trying to force God's hand. Our desire to control life is what throws the future off balance. Trying to force God's hand through prayer is just like trying to change the world. Both actions end up doing damage. But the world that gets destroyed isn't the world around us. It's the world inside of us. By thinking we're separate from the universe, we damage our own sense of peace. The only way to find true trust and unity is to clear our minds of all the conditioning that clouds our view of the world. If we can do this, peace on earth could be possible. Each of us would follow our own path in life without resistance, allowing the Tao to naturally guide us. And as we stop forcing life to go our way, our hearts will naturally soften and we'll begin to see where the Tao is leading us. The language of the Tao, the way it communicates, can only be understood when we've stopped trying to control everything. When we stop forcing things in our minds, we allow the true power of Ti, which means virtue or inner strength, to shine through. Trust is always within us, even though it's often hidden by all the ways we've been conditioned to think and act. But when we let go of that conditioning, the natural way of the Tao can unfold in our lives and in the world around us. The heart of Eastern wisdom teaches us to live naturally in the world without rejecting it. But many spiritual paths make the mistake of condemning or judging the world, thinking that by doing so they can rise above their desires. What they don't realize is that even in trying not to desire, they are still desiring something. This is a point the Buddha understood deeply. Lao-tzu saw all these attempts to rid oneself of desires as nothing more than spiritual pride, a way of moving further away from our true human nature. Instead of resisting the world or trying to escape it, we're meant to live fully in it, accepting things as they are. The Taoist way of looking at life is all about fully embracing everything. Every part of life and every part of yourself. Just like the ancient philosopher Chuang-Tzu did. Chuang-Tzu didn't hold back from life. Instead, he jumped right into it, bringing the inner peace and harmony he had within himself into the world around him. In the introduction to The Complete Works of Chuang-Tzu, Burton Watson sums up Chuang-Tzu's approach to life. Once a person lets go of the normal way society teaches us to judge things, they can't be hurt by life anymore. Why? Because they stop seeing poverty as worse than wealth, or death as worse than life. Chuang-Tzu didn't run away from the world or hide from it, because doing that would still mean he was judging the world as something bad or something to avoid. Instead, he stayed right in the middle of society, but he wasn't driven by the things that motivate most people, things like chasing after money, fame, success, or safety. He lived in a state that Taoism calls Wu-Wei, which translates to inaction. But this doesn't mean he just sat around doing nothing. It means he acted without trying to force things, without being driven by a desire for gain or achievement. In Wu-Wei, all actions flow naturally, just like how things in nature happen without effort. In this way, Chuang-Tzu became one with nature. He called it heaven and blended himself with the Tao, which is the underlying force that connects everything in the universe, from humans to nature and beyond. Chuang-Tzu often described this way of living by comparing it to the work of an artist or a skilled craftsman. A talented woodcarver, for example, doesn't have to stop and think about every cut he makes. His skill has become such a natural part of him that he just moves instinctively, without planning or overthinking. In the same way, Chuang-Tzu believed that when someone reaches a state of Wu-Wei, they act naturally and spontaneously, and success follows without them even knowing why. Another way Chuang-Tzu talked about this free and effortless way of living was through the idea of wandering. He used the word yu, which means to wander, to describe how an enlightened person moves through life. This wandering isn't aimless or lost. It's about moving through all of creation, fully enjoying the beauty and wonder of life without getting attached to any single part of it. It's about being free, free from expectations, free from judgment, free from the pressures that weigh most people down, and just flowing with life as it comes. Chuang-Tzu never once turned against the world or condemned it. Instead, he used his sharp humor and wit to highlight Wu-Wei, a natural way of living that the world has largely forgotten. He didn't preach about escaping desires or detaching from them, as that would only lead to a kind of spiritual arrogance. But at the same time, he wasn't suggesting that we should simply give in to our desires and become lazy or indulgent. What Lao-tzu and Chuang-Tzu are really saying is that when we take the time to look deeply, not just at ourselves, but at the world around us, we'll find something remarkable. The nature of the human heart is actually the same as the nature of the universe, and that essence is love. This kind of love isn't something you discover and then keep all to yourself. It's a love that spreads, a love that brings harmony to the world little by little, piece by piece, or as we might say, piece by piece. Following the way of Tao is about bringing this love into the world, and when you do, it can touch even those who hold on to rigid beliefs. This kind of love, which is often described in many spiritual paths as the result of true enlightenment, can't be reached if we don't first accept ourselves and the world around us. It requires a deep understanding of both our inner world and the outer world. Lao-tzu's teachings are vast and can be hard to fully grasp because each person's experience is different. But one thing that makes Taoism unique is that it doesn't have strict doctrines, rules, or formulas to follow. This openness allows Taoism to connect with every part of our consciousness, reaching into our minds and hearts in ways that other spiritual paths might not. Lao-tzu's Taoism also embraces the darker parts of ourselves, recognizing that through exploring our shadow side, we discover our true relationship with others and the world. This process opens the door to transformation and helps us work through the hidden pain we carry. The I Ching, one of the most important texts in Taoism, was created to help us understand the full picture of our psychology, something that even Carl Jung was deeply interested in. The goal is to dive deep into ourselves, to bring everything into the light, and to accept who we are, flaws and all. Only then, when we've done that inner work, can we truly understand what it means to be human. When we reach this point, we can sympathize with the pain of others because we've embraced our own pain with humility. According to Lao-tzu, anything less than a truly humble heart is dangerous for the world. We can't form real meaningful connections with others or with the world if we still hold on to personal agendas and haven't come to terms with our own struggles. Living in the spirit of Wu-Wei, that effortless action without forcing things, is the cure for many of the problems we face in the world. Trusting and accepting ourselves as well as others is the key to building healthy and peaceful relationships, not only with one another, but also with the environment around us. When we let go of agendas and work through the spiritual barriers within ourselves, we bring the wisdom of the Tao into the world. This wisdom then flows naturally, helping to heal both people and the planet. When we truly know ourselves, we begin to understand others, and we can feel our deep connection, not only to nature but to the entire universe. Our relationships, whether they're with other people, with nature, or with the cosmos, can only be real and peaceful if we trust in their true nature. Those who live according to Wu-Wei understand this more than anyone else because they allow life to unfold naturally, without trying to control it. By letting things be as they are, they bring balance and peace to the world, reflecting the untouched purity, calm, and vibrancy of nature itself. It's only when we realize that our own true nature is rooted in Wu-Wei that we can start to build a meaningful relationship not only with ourselves, but with the entire universe in all its magnificence. The most profound relationship we can have emerges when we live in harmony with Wu-Wei. This ultimate relationship is with the Tao, the way of nature, which is not separate from us. It is our nature. In other spiritual traditions, this idea might be compared to Atman, the individual soul, being one with Brahman, the universal soul. When we live according to Wu-Wei, we become aware of this connection and actually experience ourselves as part of the way. No amount of scientific study or logical thinking can ever truly explain this, but we know it's real because we live it and feel it. To live in this harmony with the Tao is to be in tune with the greatest relationship of all. The way of nature is experienced through living Wu-Wei, because Wu-Wei is the very essence of the universe. But in today's world, where we see so much destruction of the environment for the sake of material wealth, and so much division among people, we must urgently return to our Wu-Wei nature. If we don't, we'll suffer the consequences of our ignorance and actions. The way we treat each other and our planet right now shows just how disconnected we are from this natural way of living. We act like machines, driven by greed and power, destroying anything that gets in our way. This state of being, where we're trapped in our own little worlds, is like a deep sleep. We're convinced that we have to constantly fight to survive against everything around us. This belief keeps us chained to our animal instincts. But if we can release this fear, we can finally become truly human. The systems we've built, our societies, governments, and even some religions keep us isolated. Many religions, for instance, paint a picture of God as distant and separate from the world, a ruler to be obeyed. This idea makes it easier for people to be controlled. But when we see God as something universal, both within us and all around us, this conflicts with many religious teachings that prefer to keep God at a distance, like a king or lord far removed from everyday life. This view of the world is like being under a spell. It's hypnotic because in reality, everything in the world, including us humans, is part of nature. How could God be separate from anything? And we haven't even begun to talk about how the forces of the universe, like the stars and planets, affect our minds and our consciousness. Astrology, for example, speaks to how these cosmic forces play a role in our lives, which makes sense if we understand that these forces are also part of God. Religion, science, and philosophy, when they set boundaries around what they can explain, are damaging our minds. They may work within those boundaries, but they miss the true essence of an eternal God who is limitless and beyond all restrictions. Lao-tzu's Taoism was all about reminding people that God is not only within us, but also in nature. When we work with nature instead of fighting against it, we align ourselves with the Tao. This connection with the Tao awakens a higher state of consciousness in us, which in turn creates the conditions for others to recognize the Tao within themselves through their own nature. This cycle of awakening is how true harmony and peace can spread across the world. Aldous Huxley, the well-known English mystical philosopher and writer, touches on an important truth in his book, The Perennial Philosophy. He talks about how we fail to recognize God's presence in the world by sharing a story from the ancient Taoist text of Chuang-Tzu. The idea that God is present in the world carries a very practical message, that nature is sacred and it's foolish and sinful for humans to try to dominate it rather than working with it in harmony. Everything in the world, from animals to even inanimate objects, should be treated with care and understanding, not harshly forced to serve our selfish human desires. There was a ruler of the Southern Ocean named Shu, a ruler of the Northern Ocean named Hu, and a ruler of the center named Chaos. Shu and Hu often met up in the land of Chaos, who was always kind to them. One day, they decided they wanted to repay Chaos for his kindness. They said, "Everyone has 7 openings to see, hear, eat, and breathe, but Chaos has none. Let's make some for him." So, every day they dug a hole in Chaos. After 7 days, Chaos died. Chuang-Tzu. This amusing little parable shows chaos as a symbol of nature in a state of balance, or what we might call Wu-Wei, a state of effortless action, where everything is in harmony. Shu and Hu represent the kind of people who believe they can improve on nature. These are the folks who took dry grasslands and turned them into wheat fields, only to end up creating deserts. They are the ones who proudly celebrated their victory over the air with airplanes, but then realized they had destroyed something deeper, like civilization itself. These are the same people who chopped down huge forests to satisfy the demand for newspapers, thinking that universal literacy would make the world smarter and safer. Instead, they got erosion, cheap pulp magazines, and newspapers that became platforms for fascist, communist, capitalist, and nationalist propaganda. In short, Shu and Hu represent those who blindly believe in the modern religion of progress at any cost. They think that the kingdom of heaven is somewhere out there, far away in the future, waiting to be reached through technological advancements or social changes. But Chuang-Tzu, being a Taoist, has no interest in forcing nature into submission for some short-sighted goals. Instead, he wishes to work with nature, creating conditions where people can live in harmony with the Tao, the way of the universe, on every level, from their mental well-being to their spiritual growth. What Huxley wants us to realize through this story is that when we try to control nature and shape it according to our desires, we end up destroying the very thing we were trying to improve. True wisdom, as Chuang-Tzu and Taoism teach, is to collaborate with nature, to let things unfold naturally, and to find peace within that flow. This balance, this state of Wu-Wei, is where we can live fully in touch with both the world and the deeper spiritual truths that bind us all together. In comparison to the beliefs of Taoists and Far Eastern Buddhists, The Christian approach to nature has often been shockingly harsh and aggressive, while Taoism and Buddhism in the East have long embraced nature with reverence. Christianity, driven by a misinterpretation of a passage from Genesis, has treated animals and the natural world as mere tools for humans to use however they please. This view has led many Catholic moralists to justify exploiting animals, seeing them as nothing more than objects for human benefit. In Europe, movements that promoted kindness towards animals and appreciation for nature, such as the humanitarian movement and landscape painting, were mostly non-religious. These movements developed apart from religious teachings. However, in the Far East, such appreciation of nature and kindness were deeply rooted in spiritual and religious beliefs. If we can step away from rigid dogmas and start working harmoniously with nature, we'll create the conditions necessary for everyone to experience and realize the Tao. Ironically, the type of social morality that Confucius envisioned, where people live in harmony, can only come into existence by not forcing it. Social harmony and morality cannot be brought about through rules or pressure. They come from individuals who are deeply in tune with themselves and who trust the natural way of things. Dogmas, with their strict rules and rigid beliefs, can never truly free an individual or humanity as a whole. This is because dogmas are built on ideas of force and control, which contradict the natural flow of the Tao. Instead, if we are bold enough to embrace Wu-Wei, the art of effortless action and non-forcing, then the right social and cultural conditions will naturally arise. These conditions will allow people to experience the Tao in their own lives, and this will bring real lasting change to the world, without the need for us to try and force it. In fact, the very act of trying to force change is what often stops change from happening. True change comes from simply following your own nature, letting things unfold as they will. This is also how love grows beyond just personal affection and becomes something universal, something that touches all things. Our love must stretch beyond the boundaries we've set. It has to go beyond just loving our neighbors and also include those we see as enemies. It needs to extend to all living beings, animals, plants, even the minerals that make up our planet. When we work with nature, instead of trying to control or destroy it, we embody the essence of Wu-Wei. We reflect the natural, effortless way of the universe. And through this, we help create a world that thrives in harmony, love, and peace. Living according to Wu-Wei is often seen as one of the most challenging and yet beautiful spiritual paths one can follow. It may seem incredibly hard to let go, trust, and allow life to flow without interference. But this is precisely how we discover our true nature, called Lai in Taoism. And when we uncover our Lai, something amazing happens. We tap into the power of Ti, a kind of inner virtue or strength that naturally inspires and uplifts the world around us. This is how real harmony is created, when heaven and earth come together through this alignment with the Tao. It is often necessary to go through a period of spiritual isolation in order to reach the deepest parts of your being. This quiet time allows you to look within and discover who you truly are. But once you've found that core part of yourself, you naturally want to connect and resonate with the world around you. This is what the Taoists call yin, or mutual resonance. The inner truth that you find during your time of solitude starts to pull you back toward life. Just like how a wise guru from the East will often leave their meditation cave to return to the world. The difference now, though, is that you have transformed. The Guru is no longer just some distant figure. The Guru is now you. And the love that you bring back into the world is the love that you've uncovered within yourself. This love isn't something you hold on to just for your own benefit. It's something you share freely with the world because it's a part of who you are. The world we live in can be whatever it wants to be. It has infinite possibilities and paths it can follow. But here's the catch. If you don't trust the world to find its way, then it will stay stuck in the same patterns it always has. This is the paradox of unity and our nature. The more we let go and trust, the more everything falls into place naturally. When we live in Wu-Wei, we stop forcing things and start aligning with the true flow of life. That's when we become one with the world, when harmony and peace naturally arise. Thank you for listening.